Come to expect great things.
Joining me right now is former foreign policy advisor to then candidate Donald Trump. Carter Paige is here with me. And Carter, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Maria.
You are at the heart of all of this. Your name came up, obviously, yesterday throughout the hearing because it was you that was surveilled on as the FBI or this cabal of people used you as a window into the Trump campaign. Are you feeling vindicated after yesterday?
Well, I think, I think as a lot of the senators said, this is a terrible process for our entire country, right? So I think it's a long road to renewal and restoration of our surveillance state and our whole entire judicial system. I mean, there's such a dark cloud. There was once a dark cloud over myself and the Trump campaign and all the people associated with it, including the candidate Trump. But now there's this dark cloud over both the justice system as well as the U.S. court system as well. So it's a major problem, and there's a lot that needs to be done to get to the bottom of it.
We have a graphic of a timeline that we've been working on, and of course we've seen this on Sunday Morning Futures on my program that you've joined me on over on Fox News. But in this timeline, it shows specifically how you were actually an informant for the government for many years. You worked with with various intel agencies in 2008 and then again in 2013. And one of the exculpatory pieces of evidence that wasn't given to the FISA court as a justification to wiretap you, they didn't tell the FISA court that you were actually a partner of the government over the years. What other exculpatory evidence do you want to talk about this morning?
Well, I think, look, this is a example. I mean, every page, Congressman Nunes was on one of the shows, who's been on your show a lot as well, and he's, saying that, every page is like a gold mine or words to that effect. In fact, the things that were in there is just the tip of the iceberg. Every page I look through, I know additional details about my life and about the people I was working with or not working with, as the case may be, and there's just so much more coming out. It's hard to summarize because there's 400 plus pages.
Sidney Powell is the lawyer for Michael Flynn, who is also waiting to see his fate. She wants the whole thing turned around because he too was surveilled unlawfully. And Sidney Powell wrote this in a tweet, I believe yesterday, talking about the timeline. Let's show Sidney Powell's tweet right here. And she is, as you see it on the screen, saying that not to mention the FBI opened an investigation into Carter Paige within 2 weeks of him joining the Trump campaign. I also want to point our viewers' attention to the IG report, and page 62 is something. I have the IG report right here, and it is on page 62 where they write in the IG report, on March 2nd, you had an interview, and she told us after the March 2nd interview, she called the counter-espionage section at the FBI headquarters to determine whether Paige had any security clearances to ask for guidance as to what type of an investigation to open on Paige. Tell me what happened on March 2nd.
Again, I think your deep research in terms of timelines and always keeping track on things has been essential. And also Sidney Powell, her work getting to the bottom of this, and the work she's doing with General Flynn. And actually, I was pushing back against DOJ to try to get Privacy Act access to it. I never got it. The reason I wanted to keep moving forward is because because General Flynn, his future and his case is all pending upon this. But in terms of that, specific example,
I had that meeting. You had a meeting on March 2nd.
Yes.
What did you tell the people you met with?
Well, they were, we talked about, and you've asked me about this on the show previously, about the case. I was a informant and helper to the FBI, and previously
this was back in the day in 2013. It was a case about 3 Russians, and they wanted you to testify against those guys.
Yes.
So that's why you were meeting with them in March of 16.
Yep. And again, this has kind of come out drip by drip. And again, I try not to talk about confidential government information, but now that it's out there, it's I have no choice but to talk about it. So essentially, I told them there are a lot of problems in these pleadings, and I don't want to, they were asking me to potentially even testify in the trial
against these three Russians
Yes.
in the Southern District of New York.
And I said, listen, if I testify, I tell the truth, right? Unlike what we saw in the FISA court.
You're gonna out them.
I have to give the full story, but that's one part. And then at the end of that, in that meeting, I also mentioned, well, the other thing is I've recently volunteered for the Trump campaign, and so I'm planning to be a volunteer supporter to the campaign. And
so on March 2nd, you tell the FBI in a meeting as sort of like a throwaway line, oh, by the way, I'm going to go join the Trump campaign. She comes back from that meeting on March 2nd. She asks her colleagues, what kind of investigation should we start on Carter Page? She receives an email from the counter-espionage section advising her to open an investigation on Paige. In addition, according to FBI records, the relevant section at FBI headquarters, they weren't sure what kind of investigation to open on you. So just the mere you telling them, I'm going to join the Trump campaign, she sends a letter and says,
well,
open an investigation.
Allegedly, and again, it's half the story. This is a perfect example, and it's like I was saying about what Congressman Nunes said about, there's so much great information. He's absolutely right. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's half of the story, and
But this is a little news nugget that is breaking news, basically. I want you to tell us: do you believe, after you told them that you were going to go work for Trump, that was one of the impetuses that they decided to start surveilling you?
Well, suffice to say, I think it's a big open question, and I mean, it's one of these things. It goes to the question of bias, right? I mean, all the Democrat senators kept saying, "Well, there's no bias. There's no bias," and I mean, that is a political thing that I'm talking about. And all of a sudden, it's a quote-unquote serendipitous. I think that term was used in the report. And serendipitous that I just happened to mention this, and all of a sudden they want to open an investigation. So
and you mentioned it at a meeting where you were helping them.
Exactly.
Because they wanted you to testify against these three Russians in the Southern District of New York case. You wrote an op-ed this week for the Wall Street Journal, and in it you said, the FBI spying ruined my good name. You write this: my experience should be a warning. After more than a year of round-the-clock surveillance under FISA warrants, I've never been charged with any crime. If senators don't demand answers, they're practically inviting intelligence agencies to use their surveillance powers to target domestic political opponents. As the Supreme Court warned nearly half a century ago, the price of lawful public dissent must not be a dread of subjection to an unchecked surveillance power. I mean, you were spied on for more than a year. They had to keep renewing the application, and Jim Comey signed that application 3 times. Andrew McCabe signed another application for you. Sally Yates signed an application, and Rod Rosenstein signed the application to re-up the surveillance on you.
Well, it's just so terrible, Maria, and there's so much. Again, it's terrific that, I sometimes didn't agree with the New York Times, but even on their front page today, they call it in the news analysis a disturbing peek at U.S. surveillance. And I think we heard that from both sides of the aisle yesterday. I think, a realization of what a serious problem this is for our country, for our U.S. intelligence community, and for really a problematic, in a Judiciary Committee context, our U.S. court system. So it's a major problem.
Let me ask you what you're going to do about it. You're going to sue. Is it the media? Who are you suing specifically?
Well, I have a pending. Last time I was on your show, I was talking about my Second Circuit case. There's things didn't go so well thus far, but I think the news which has come out and the false pleadings of the U.S. Department of Justice. I think what we've heard from Attorney General Barr over the last couple days is a deep realization, similar to Democrat and Republican senators and congressmen from both sides of the aisle, that there was this terrible thing that happened. And I think there's a lot more that needs to be done. We're going to take this right up to the Supreme Court is our plan right now, and there's a lot more follow-up. So,
So what are your expectations in terms of this lawsuit? Who are you suing?
Well, there's a few. It's a little early days. I mean, that's a massive document that our very strong team of attorneys. I will have more to announce on that in the coming weeks. But
is it the media? You going to sue the media?
Well, that was the initial lawsuit, which we talked about last time, was The Broadcasting Board of Governors, which is now U.S. Agency for Global Media, as well as the parent company of Yahoo News, which was, throughout this report, was a major driver, with Steele in this defamatory report, which came out against
and the Yahoo Report, we should point out, threw your name out there in the public when not many people knew what you were doing, and as a result of that, you got death threats. Your life completely changed. You started living like a hermit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, at all. I was an unknown figure, and then a couple of hours later after this report, this is breaking news on Friday, September 23rd, 2016, just 6 weeks before the election. I mean, real election interference, and, all of a sudden I'm this infamous public figure. So
who do you blame the most for all of this?
I think, again, I think Congressman Nunes has talked about this, about conspiracy. I think it is a real racket that
So the FBI, the cabal of people at the top of the FBI and the CIA, you blame the most?
Well, we'll see.
No, seriously, I'm asking you a question. Who do you blame the most?
Well, my initial lawsuit was against the DNC, or in a beyond the media. I had the media lawsuit, which is talking about.
Well, that paid for the dossier, and that was the reason that they were able to get the warrant to spy on you.
With their law firm, Perkins Coie, exactly.
Let me run this soundbite. This is Senator Crapo yesterday with Michael Horowitz. Got to get your reaction to this. Listen to this.
I understand why people would be skeptical of that. There is such a range of conduct here that is inexplicable, and the answers we got were not satisfactory, that we're left trying to understand how could all these errors have occurred over a 9-month period or so among 3 teams, handpicked, one of the highest profile, if not the highest profile case in the FBI, going to the very top of the organization involving a presidential campaign.
Well, I understand that. I appreciate that. I think it is explicable. But I understand that you can't, or at least